Hello and welcome to the Middle East Report. In this programme today, we'll be asking the question, public relations versus propaganda in the truth for Israel and the Jewish people. Over the past decade, we've witnessed a demonisation of Israel and the Jewish people due to false and inaccurate media reporting that in many cases has led to an increase in anti-Semitism that has also changed the perception of Israel and the Jewish state in a negative fashion. We'll be discussing ways that we can counter this media war against Israel and how Israel can effectively win the PR battle. The second part of the programme we will be discussing is the alarming and very disturbing rise of anti-Semitism across the continent of Europe once again. It was only 70 years ago that the Jewish people were sent to the gas chambers. And again today, we're witnessing the ugly rise of anti-Semitism as Jewish communities across Europe feel vulnerable to this new wave and level of attacks. And it's time that the Christian community stood by the Jewish people once again. Well, I'm joined today by Charlotte Gutman, who's travelled here all the way from Brussels on the Eurostar to be with me. And she is the Vice President of the Jewish community in Belgium. Charlotte, hello and welcome to the Middle East Report. It's a pleasure to have you on the programme, and thank you for making a long trip all the way to be here today.
Thank you, Simon. It was a pleasure. And I would like to thank you for very warmly for inviting me in your program and for supporting the Jewish case, I would say, and also the friendship between Christians and Jews.
Thank you. Well, it's my pleasure, and I think we owe so much to Israel and the Jewish community. I know that you're doing very, very good work in Belgium, and our viewers need to know what's happening in terms of Israel and the Jewish community in Europe, but also in Belgium as well. Charlotte, can you tell us a little bit more about your Jewish background and the very important work you do for Israel in terms of public relations?
Well, I'm involved in the Jewish community for more than 40 years, and my involvement has been really in many aspects, but mainly today it's my involvement with the PR work, the public relations work. And indeed, I refer to your title, PR versus propaganda. This is my subject for many years. And I think I will talk about this subject for many, many more years, unfortunately. The mission I have is really to contribute at my level to re-establish the truth and the dignity about Israel and Israelis. And this is the main subject. I am re-elected. I was re-elected a few weeks ago as the Vice President of the Jewish community, which I'm very proud of. And I used to be involved also in the different community centers with the media, Jewish media in Belgium. And my role today is really the media on behalf of the Jewish community. And I'm trying to establish the contact between the media, the journalists, the political journalists, the journalists dealing with communities, and my president of the Jewish community, Dr. Maurice Sosnowski.
Excellent. But you also have a very interesting family, don't you? And your father has, and your mother have incredible stories of incredible survival against all odds, really.
Yes.
With surviving the Shoah, the Holocaust.
This is the story of the Jewish people in Europe, unfortunately. My father was the survivor, the only survivor of a family of 38 people from Berlin. He survived Auschwitz, the death walk, and Buchenwald, where he was liberated on this exact day, April 11, 1945, by the Americans. My mother was born in Kiev, and she escaped with her mother and an aunt and cousins the Babi Yar dramatic terrorist or extermination against Jews. And they escaped to the east of Europe, and were saved, in fact, in Uzbekistan. There were Jews who were escaped in Uzbekistan. There were Jews who even escaped further and went to China even. So this is the background of my family, and obviously, as a daughter, elderly daughter of my parents, I felt very strongly the non-verbal messages they gave without willing to give them, of course. They didn't want to speak about this period of their life, and I think they were really traumatized people. And my mother is there, and she's a source of optimism and loving life, as my father was, actually.
So what was it like growing up after the Second World War, knowing that your father survived the Holocaust and a very small Jewish community in Belgium in comparison to what it was prior to World War II?
Well, Belgium was a coincidence of choice by my father after the liberation of Buchenwald, because obviously he didn't want to stay in Germany. And when he found out he was the only survivor, I mean, he had no reason to live in Germany anymore any longer. It was only related to very traumatic souvenirs. And so he established himself with survivors of Buchenwald who advised him to come and live in Brussels. And so he was in Brussels and discovered this country, a new language, and he was a refugee in 45, of course. And in 48, he was convinced with another 40 orphans, survivors of the Shoah, to go and try to help the newly Israeli army in the independence war to help.
Amazing.
And so a lot of these youngsters, he was 20 at the time, a lot of these youngsters who survived the Shoah ended up sometimes losing their lives in fighting for Israel. And he was on a Marine on the first frigate brought to Israel in 48.
Amazing. And
in Haifa, where he ended up with the ship, he met with my mother.
Oh, wonderful.
Who had made all the way through the refugee camps throughout Europe and entered Palestine and ended up meeting my father, and they married in Israel, actually.
Oh, wonderful. And I don't know if you can see there, but there's a picture of him. Can you tell us a little bit about this book, Charlotte? It's got your father with your surname, Gutman Plaza. Can you tell us something about this? Because I think it's very special.
Yes, it is very special. The municipality of Berlin, from where my father was coming, and his family actually, decided, based on a book of a journalist, a Berliner journalist, in '95, published a book about Jewish families in this neighborhood, Mahlsdorf, Ellensdorf, where the family Gutman was living before they were taken. And the municipality decided in 2008 that Gutman Platz would be nominated on a square that didn't have a name. And they chose, in the book of so many families, they chose my father's story. And he lived long enough to have this present to be offered a square under the name of his parents, sisters, and brothers who didn't make it through, as he was the only survivor. And so I think it was for him like, closing a file, that he could say the Kaddish, the prayer for his family, that he had no place to make this prayer, because one died in Buchenwald, the others in Auschwitz, and so he never was willing to go back there, actually. He said, I saw enough of it. And when I visited Auschwitz the first time, and I called him on my mobile, and I said, I'm in Auschwitz. You know what was his question? It's amazing. I visited Auschwitz a few years ago for the first time. He was asking me, is the hill of ashes still there? It was a very strong question, and I mean, I was completely moved by this question, which I never heard from his mouth. And you can imagine.
Can you describe for our viewers what the hill of ashes is?
Well, it was a big hill of ashes next to the gas chamber, and
So
where they
bodies,
were burning the
yeah.
bodies. Yes. And so you see with what he was living, what kind of images he was trying to live normally. But as I say about the Israelis also, they live normally in a completely abnormal situation. And this is the story of all the survivors of this traumatic period as Jews, yes. Of course, there were Jews who were luckier, like my family-in-law. They were hidden in families in Belgium. Belgium was one of the countries that has hidden most of Jewish children. I think they reached more than 4,000 Jewish children. It was really a network of resistance to save the Jewish children, at least. And so we have in our community group one of the 40 organizations that we represent is the Hidden Child. And they have more than 1,000 members, because these children who were saved in the war today are grandparents and are members of this organization.
Wonderful. Which really does show the incredible story of the Jewish people and that instinct for survival and then prospering out of horrendous circumstances. I know that we said earlier, and we talked about earlier, your involvement in the Jewish community in Belgium, extremely active, which is wonderful. Have you seen, in the case of a lot of the public relations work you've been doing over the last few years, a change in the perception of Israel and the Jewish people?
The situation is such that the journalists who are dealing with Israel, political journalists, are often not journalists respecting the ethics of journalists. And they became militants. So I can give you the example of one that I tried to connect with in the beginning of my new position in the community. And I thought, this is the number one I have to talk to. And what do I hear? He went 40 times to Israel. 40 times to Israel. But his direct destination was not Israel, was Gaza. And he spent 40 years visiting, 40 times visiting Gaza. So you can imagine the brainwash that he went through, because I really consider that the journalists are being brainwashed first. And through their articles, they are responsible for the brainwash of public opinion, not only in Europe, I think worldwide, because the communication tools today enable the messages to go simultaneously and internationally in a minute. So this is what we are witnessing, all of us today. And this brainwash is based on biased information. And it's terrible, because the way they write is a caricature way. And I would like, if you don't mind, talk about here the Code of Ethics for Journalists.
Sure, of course.
There are 10 points that journalists need to respect, and I think they are not respecting them. Now, I don't want to pinpoint specific journalists, but in general, that's why we are in such a situation today, where we can't say a positive word about Israel, because in a way we are being trapped somehow in an image, in a biased image that is, preceding us in whatever we want to say. First, we have to respect the freedom of the press, for sure. But today, it's a bit strange, because the freedom of the press is being used as an asset by the ones who want to say and put the lies forward.
Yeah.
So they need to handle objectively the facts. Sometimes they are not looking into the facts. They're just repeating and duplicating what is written maybe in a press release they receive. I can imagine they receive a lot of press releases, anti-Israeli press releases. They have to separate information from comments. And you know, I witnessed a few weeks ago on a French television channel, there was an interview by the journalist of the Prime Minister of Israel. And the way she was asking the question was, you know, accusing the Prime Minister of Israel in the way she was asking the question. So I thought, where is the journalist in there? It's already militant behavior. Because in Europe, we have to admit that the public opinion, politically correct public opinion, is pro-Palestinian and anti-Israeli, unfortunately. Obviously, they need to respect others' opinion, respect human dignity. And I think sometimes they don't, in case of the Israeli country. They cannot glorify violence. And I think today the violence is all over the TV channels. The experts of Miami, the experts of Miami, and in the news, it's only the bad news. And when I try to tell them that why don't they show the friendship between Muslims and Jews in Israel, they are not interested in these stories. They just want the dramatic and accounting, the demoniac accounting of deaths, of casualties. They have to rectify wrong information, which obviously, when you want to rectify a wrong information that was published, you will never get the publicity of what was the first information that you are trying to rectify. This is the story of the Goldstone report. This is the story of the Mohammed al-Dura, symbol of the Second Intifada, and that's it. You will never be able to rectify it in the same.
And the Jenin massacre, is the so-called Jenin massacre, that didn't turn out to be a massacre as well. Yeah.
They have to protect sources of information, which they do, respect confidentiality, respect human rights, and independence. And obviously, advertising cannot be presented as information.
Mm-hmm. So looking at this, really, the 1980s, we had two major conflicts in the Middle East in the 1980s. Well, we had quite a few, but in terms of Israel's involvement, we had the Lebanon War in 1982, in which Israel went to war against the PLO, who were firing missiles and rockets over and terrorizing northern Israel. And Israel then came to defense of the Christian president in Lebanon and the Christian community in Lebanon, who were under siege from the PLO. Which then really started media scrutiny upon Israel. And then in 1987, we had the first Palestinian uprising known as the First Intifada, in which Israel perception was changed away from being David into being a Goliath against the so-called oppressed Palestinians. How come it's taken Israel so long to realize that she's in a media war, and how long it's taken her to realize that she needs a very effective public relations campaign in order to put her message and her perception across?
First Intifada, I was employee in an Israeli multinational company in the graphic arts industry. And I suggested to the management to celebrate the 20th anniversary of this company. It was Scitex. I don't know if you heard of it. And the management said I was completely crazy, but they let me do my project. And they thought I would fail with my project of organizing a group from Europe, visiting Israel, and celebrating the 20th anniversary. And we had a Christian tour, actually. And for me, it was the first time I visited Israel on the Christian side. It was very interesting for me to participate in this trip, because it took place, this trip. I had 55 participants, mainly clients, also journalists, who paid for 1 week in Israel during the First Intifada. And so this I consider as my first success. Second Intifada, in between, in '96, I had a group, I brought a lot of journalists, telecom, high-tech, business journalists to Israel to visit my Israeli clients that I had through my European PR agency. And I witnessed a lot of amazing reactions of mainly Germans who came to Israel for the first time and were moved and shocked, and I call it the cultural shock. And in '96, I had a conversation with one Belgian editor, the #1 telecom editor, who had participated in the group to Israel a few weeks before. And he prolonged his stay. And prolonged his stay, I found out that he went to Gaza. And he talked to me with comments, you know, horrible comments about Israelis that I couldn't stand. And that moment, and during that conversation, I woke up about my mission in life. You know, I was wondering many years, what was my mission in this life? Why am I here? I'm supposed to do something. And then I discovered my mission, which was to combat biased information, biased image about Israel and Israelis. And at my level, I tried my best, as I think many people started to do when the Second Intifada started. Because Second Intifada was the beginning of dramatic biased information. And all Israel, the government, the Jewish friends that Israel had in the world, suddenly everybody woke up like a PR person. And I had done my bit between '96 and 2000. And from this time of the Second Intifada, of course, I was more involved officially and not at my own level. That's how I think, in the end of the day, I became vice president of the Jewish community in Belgium.
Very good, very good.
Did I answer all the questions?
You did, you did. We're just going to go to a clip now. We just got a clip to show you about how Israel is countering a lot of the accusation and lies through effective PR campaigns and using social media to do so.
Often on the news, we hear the terms occupied territories.
Deputy Foreign Minister Danny Ayalon is causing waves in the Arab world after he posted a video on YouTube dubbed "Whose Territory Is It?" and discussed the facts of Judea and Samaria, popularly referred to as the West Bank, and its historical status. Ayalon also challenged Palestinian negotiator Saeb Erekat to a live debate to discuss the issues. For too long, Israel has remained silent in the face of the distortion of facts and the international law, he said. The only way to reach a solution is by telling the truth. In the video, Ayalon relates to the terms used by the Arab media, such as occupied territories, which he refers to as disputed territories. Over 100 Jewish and non-Jewish schools in the United States said they would screen the video as part of history classes. And the Central Conference of American Rabbis also said it would screen the video when lecturing American Jews who serve in the US military. Ayalon, meanwhile, says he plans to post more videos, including the truth about the Palestinian refugee issue.
Welcome back to Middle East Report. There was a news briefing on the Deputy Israeli Foreign Minister Danny Ayalon's clips to expose the lies and propaganda that's been targeted against Israel. Charlotte, I just want to read out one thing here, that I read this very interesting article recently entitled "Obama's Media War Against Israel," in which a famous Israeli military personnel is mentioned. His name's Ron Ben Yashali, who's quoted as one of the leading military experts in Israel, in which he says that President Obama is exploiting American and British media to prevent attack on Iran's nuclear facilities, which is an extremely dangerous thing to do. Why do you think he's actually using a media campaign to cause Israel problems?
Probably because he knows that his message would get through. Because if a president of the United States wants to get the message through to the media, he can get it through. Now, about the content, I don't want to comment on this because I think it's a very delicate issue. I think Israelis are under threat, and some people don't take it seriously. I think Israelis have the right to defend themselves. And beyond this, it's the politicians and the diplomacy that has to arrange this issue, because it's not in my hands and in my power to comment on this.
Yeah. So in your experience and expertise, what can Israel do to effectively counter the lies, the propaganda, the demonization of Israel and the Jewish people, and start to win this public relations battle which she's engaged in?
Yes, so Israelis woke up late, very late. I hope not too late. In Judaism, we don't want to say negative things because we think that words are making their way. So I want to remain optimistic that things can still be reversed. I believe Israeli spokespersons need to address the issue of biased information, of the immense gap, as I call it, between biased information and reality. And this can be seen with people coming to Israel for the first time. They're all under cultural shock, and they're discovering a country that they didn't expect, without soldiers, without police, and how comes that I can walk on the beach in Tel Aviv, and there are more policemen on the seaside in Belgium than in Tel Aviv, etc., etc. So it's very interesting to issue that I believe should be tackled as it is. It is beyond politics, in my opinion. It is beyond intellectualizations of the conflict. We have to get down to what it really is. It is a propaganda campaign using the Goebbels tools. What are the tools? The lies and the turn speech.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on that, by what you mean, Charlotte?
So what did Goebbels say? Goebbels did say, lie, lie, lie. There will always be something left from it. Or the bigger the lie, the more it will be believed. And we're going through this now. There are amazing things being said about Israel and Israelis, and it gets through like nothing.
Yeah. And Goebbels was in charge of Hitler's propaganda campaign.
He was called the Minister of People's Enlightenment and Propaganda. So I want to say it because it's amazing. He wanted to win over the spirit of people instead of winning on the field, on the battlefield, fighting with arms against the opponents. He wanted to brainwash the people so that they would be part of one community and think the same way. And for me, he made the Shoah, the Holocaust, happen. Without this propaganda, without this brainwash, without the people thinking that Jews were the utmost devil, I don't think that the Holocaust would have existed.
Because didn't Goebbels use the imagery of rats, and so therefore use rats and compared them to Jews, so that there would be public disgust in Germany against the Jewish people, so that they wouldn't even be seen as human? And that really came down to why the Nazi regime was so effective in its campaign against the Jewish people, because they dehumanized the Jewish people.
Yes.
And wasn't that at the center of his propaganda campaign?
Yes, yes, it was. But you know, Jews were hidden also in Germany, huh? So it didn't win on all the people's mind. But he managed to threaten the people. And I think if we compare it with today's situation in Europe, I believe many people are being threatened in a way and are not expressing themselves. So there is no freedom of speech, because in a way people are threatened. And but I hope that the silent majority that is shaking a little bit in Belgium anyway will wake up and be more heard.
And Also, what is this new form of anti-Semitism that the Jewish people are facing? Because it seems to have metamorphosized. Instead of attacking the Jewish person as an individual or as a religion, now it's attacking anti-Zionism, which is a belief that the Jewish people have a right to their ancient covenant homeland in the land of Israel and have the right to live there and to prosper there. And the other thing we're seeing really is a demonization of Israel in the international community as a nation state.
Israel became the Jew of nations. It became the Jew of nations because of the propaganda campaign in place. Anything, everything is to be blamed on Israel. I don't know, I think the anti-Israeli resolutions in the UN are the most impressive number in all the resolutions taken by the UN. And when you think that the Commission for Human Rights in the UN lately also pointed on Israel for a new inquiry, I think that when you know that Libya was part of it and other very dictatorial countries were part of this commission, it's a bit awkward. I mean, I don't understand why there are no demonstrations about that in the world. And still, since the Arab Spring and what's going on now in Syria, and when I see 3 demonstrators in front of the Israeli embassy in Brussels, and I go to them and I say, can't you demonstrate in front of the Syrian embassy at the moment? There's the drama and the human rights attempts. And then they would say, it's not our business. We are for Israel. We are claiming against Israel. It becomes a job at the end of the day.
Yeah, because I remember meeting you, Charlotte, with our dear friend Evangelos, who's a dear friend. And when, in the course of the meetings that he set up for me, I met with you, I met with other Jewish leaders, also met with representatives from the Israeli embassy, to Belgium, also to the European Union. And I was shocked and horrified by the resurgence in anti-Semitism that's happening in Belgium and happening in Europe. Can you describe how your community feels in Belgium with this rise of anti-Semitism?
I believe, to come back to the brainwash, it's a step in the propaganda campaign. It had to happen. It had to come to that stage because the anti-Israeli behavior in Europe is such that obviously anti-Israeli, anti-Jewish is linked. It's very narrow. There is no border between one or the other because any Jew would be very much linked to Israel and concerned about the future of Israel. Because what I often hear is that now we have Israel. Shoah Holocaust cannot happen again because now we have Israel defending us. And it's true, they proved already in the past, and Tebe, that they were saving Jews who were in trouble in the world. They didn't only save Jews, they also save, they are non-sectarian, I would say. They also save people, humanity. They are humans. The number of NGOs in Israel that are going around in the world to help to save, not to mention Haiti, is a minimum.
We've got a clip to go to now that looks at the rise of anti-Semitism across the continent of Europe, but more particular on what's happening in Belgium.
centres communautaires laïcs, diffuser la culture israélienne, renforcer notre solidarité avec Israël. Israël qui est un État raciste, ségrégationniste et colonial. Un débat ouvert, sans concession, avec l'extrême droite. La question du négationnisme ne m'intéresse pas. D'ailleurs, je n'ai pas d'avis, puisque il est interdit d'avoir un avis dessus, donc en tant que légaliste, je m'en tiens à la vérité.
Welcome back to the Middle East Report. You saw in that clip very, very disturbing images that have occurred in Belgium, and we see that anti-Semitism has returned to Belgium and the continent of Europe with a vengeance. And we haven't seen this level of anti-Semitism in Europe since the 1930s and 40s. And this is a cancer, it's an evil that we must confront if we are to save Europe from self-destruction. Charlotte just saw that clip there and just horrified to see the public displays of anti-Semitism, the public displays of anti-Israel sentiment, and there we saw a play being played where Islamists were dressing up as Palestinians and dressing up Israeli soldiers and saying that Israelis kill innocent women and children. As we know, what Israeli soldiers do is that they protect Israel from terrorist attacks, and actually in many cases help so many Palestinians who are in so much need that they don't get help from their own. But this is frightening that this is happening once again in 2012, like it did in the 1930s and 40s.
For me, it's Bollywood. It's really a theater play, very demonic play, because it wants to hurt the integrity and the dignity of Israelis and of Jews. So this is my summary about these films. I was in the university on the conference you just showed. The way they are aggressing with words is, in my opinion, unfair within the Code of Ethics of Public Relations, and I would like here to make a little presentation of the use of words that we are hearing every day, and sometimes the words are not the right words. So when they talk about a war, they rather should talk about a conflict. There is a democracy versus dictatorship, and you cannot put them on the same level. The truth versus lies. How do you distinguish the truth and the lies today in the news? It's almost impossible. Praise of life on one side and the praise of death on the other side. Try to be awake about this and conscious about this. The parameter, the equation of land, historic land, versus Islamic jihad. The honorable work versus terrorism. The peace versus war. The victim versus aggressor. You know, today when you listen to the news in Belgium at least, Every time there is news about Israel, they first would give and show the Israelis as the aggressors. I'm talking about the Gaza Strip. And then at the end, they would say they were answering provocation by Palestinians. I don't know, put it in the right order. And then I called this journalist at the radio channel, national radio channel in Belgium. And I told him, why don't you put it in the right order? Why do you present Israelis as aggressors? He said, listen, I'm having the news on the hour, I have 2 minutes, I cannot tell the whole story. I said, I'm sorry. You have a responsibility to answer people ignorance about the Middle East. And if you continue to caricature the Israelis as aggressors, we'll never get out of this trap. I call it a trap. And there is the builders versus the destructors. The disputed versus occupied territories. I agree with Mr. Ayalon, but maybe the way he was putting up the film and very late. You agree, this film is on like 1 year. And if they woke up in 2000, this should have been put up in 2000. It's very late. I mean, it's amazingly late. And the security fence versus apartheid, in the meantime, the security fence saved a lot of lives. And IDF Tzahal, to me, we don't have to forget that Israel Defense Forces. And so I wanted to re-emphasize this. And if you want, I can also mention in the Code of Ethics of Public Relations, so, if you agree.
Really what you're talking about here is how misreporting of the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians is being used through the media to turn public opinion across Europe against the Jewish people.
Yeah.
And this is why dangerous Islamist groups plays into their hands.
Yes. Yes, I mean, it's a fact. This is what's going on. The drama in Toulouse is just nonsense. And the amazing thing is that they're turning the killer into a victim now of the French society, which didn't succeed a multicultural integration. So we are trapped. I have no other word. I mean, the setup of theater plays against the Israelis is just reconducting the suffering of Jews into their history. So in a way, they're stealing the Jewish history and putting into the Palestinian history. I don't know, I've read that the name of Palestinians was not used in the Quran until Jordan was responsible for Eastern Jerusalem since '67. So I don't know, between 48 and 67, where nobody could go into Jerusalem and pray at the Wailing Wall. There was no freedom to, as of today. Anybody, any religion can go to Jerusalem and pray freely in their beliefs, in their religion.
So, but if we take, for example, the horrendous attack in Toulouse against the Jewish school, in which a rabbi was gunned down, his 2 small boys were gunned down, and that poor Jewish girl was shot in the head 3 times by this Islamist in France. And now we're seeing that there is an increase in emails and threats against Jewish schools. We're seeing cemeteries attacked in Paris and in Nice, and we're seeing this violence being raised against the Jewish community, with many Jewish people either making aliyah to Israel or fleeing to the United States for safety. How vulnerable is the Jewish community in Europe to anti-Semitism? And as Christians, how can we respond to this new form of anti-Semitism?
We wait and see, I would say, for the ones who are staying in Europe. You mentioned that Aliyah is going to Israel. I think the community, the Belgian community in Israel is more than 10,000 people today. I know that the youngsters, many are leaving Belgium, leaving Europe because they don't see a future for them in Europe. There is a demographical war going on that is very soft, but still it's on. And I believe that we need to remain optimistic, but we have to observe that, contradictory to what happened with the Holocaust, which was institutionalized anti-Semitism going down to the people, here we have to observe an anti-Semitism from the bottom of the society raising up to the decision makers of the country. So let's see what they will decide. It's in their hands in the end of the day.
What is the trigger point? What is starting this new conflict of anti-Semitism that we've really seen over the last 10 years or so?
Maybe it's waking up some feelings that people have had inside, and they have an opportunity now to show that they are anti-Jewish, because to be with the victims of the other side of the conflict in the Middle East is politically more correct than to be pro-Israelis. And I think that this situation has to change, has to be balanced according to the true situation, because we are living like a nightmare.
And also, what is the impact on the rise of radical Islamism across Europe that poses a threat to the Jewish community, but also poses a threat to our Judean Christian heritage and the whole continent of Europe?
I think that 10% of the Muslim society in Europe is part of the extremists. And they are deciding for the other 90% who are moderate people, who want to live in peace, who just want to enjoy life and practice their religion softly. And there is a movement that is extremist in Europe, and Sarkozy showed it in a tough way and maybe in an impressive way that pleased, I believe, the silent majority, and wondering why he was waiting so long. And hopefully it will have an effect so that Europe will remain a continent where people can live in peace. It is a multicultural society, it is a multi-religious society. We can live in peace.
And Charlotte, we're down to probably the last 3 minutes or so left of the programme. Can you describe how the Christian community in particular can play a role? I believe very much that the Christians throughout Europe mainly failed during World War II, during the 1930s and the 1940s, to stand with Israel and the Jewish people. There were some very brave Christians that did stand with the Jewish people, particularly in Holland and other places in Poland, who rescued Jewish people, and others that were sent to the concentration camps because they did. But I believe that Christians have a historic opportunity today to rewrite a wrong and to stand with the Jewish people against this tidal wave of evil that is sweeping across Europe. What is the best way that the Christian community can get involved with standing with Israel and the Jewish people?
I'm talking about PR, so versus propaganda. So you can help the Jewish people to restore the truth about their history. I think too many people still today are thinking that Jesus was killed by Jews. Jesus was a Jew who was killed by the Romans. So it's basic historical facts. So help us to reestablish the truth from the beginning of this era, Judeo-Christian era. I like to insist on this connection because I really believe that we are living in a Jewish-Christian era, and the word Jewish is too many times forgotten by the spokespersons in general. So work on reestablishing the truth, only the truth, and I think things may get better, hopefully.
Charlotte, haven't we seen in recent years, which is historical and also amazing, because of the increase in anti-Semitism, because of the increase on attacks on Israel, this has really brought the Jewish and Christian community together. And for the first time, there's real friendships now being made between the Jewish community and the Christian community.
I can only be happy about it. I really believe we are living in a Jewish Christian era, and the first word is often forgotten by the spokespersons. And I insist on that. I think it's important to be linked to our history, background history, and we cannot deny it. We have the same values. We almost have the same feasts at the same time, and we have the respect of humanity, human rights, and I believe that we have a lot in common. The only thing is that we need your help in a way today, because we are being threatened. Christians are also being threatened, by the way, in certain countries. So we are in the same side of the problem, maybe, and we need to work together on friendship, on developing more and more meetings and conferences, maybe seminars, workshops, to get the message through and get the truth out.
I hope this program goes some way in doing that, Charlotte. Thank you very much for being my guest on the Middle East Report today, and thank you for letting us know what's happening in Belgium and also the public relations war that Israel's in. Just want to thank you all for watching today's Middle East Report. As you can see, that in Europe there's an alarming rise of anti-Semitism that is targeting vulnerable Jewish communities across Europe once again. And if we don't stand with the Jewish people, if we don't fight with the Jewish people to fight against anti-Semitism, then we can only see the continent of Europe enter into dark, dark times like it did in the 1930s and 40s. Here is our opportunity now to stand for truth and fight against propaganda in standing with Israel and the Jewish people.
כל ערב אמר לה עינייך יונים, אך אוי לו בבוקר כי זוהי לאה, אמר לבן ליעקב וזו הבחירה.